12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and a 16 Plus. That's 5 years of iPhones, and I want to see just how much of an upgrade these new shiny 16s actually are. Because on the outside, not a whole lot has changed. The cameras went from vertical to diagonal back to vertical. The notch has become the dynamic island. Last year's 15s added the USB-C, thank goodness. Although now with the 16s we have a couple of extra buttons, with this action button and the camera control. Fantastic colors throughout though. Wouldn't you love a Pro Max in ultramarine? Why do we only get the fun colors on the cheaper ones? So I have these 5 years of iPhones all set up and running the latest iOS 18, which to be fair is great to see that software goes back so far, and actually even the XS and XR will get it, although only the new 16s and last year's 15 Pros will support Apple Intelligence, as it's slowly rolled out. Still, it all feels very familiar, especially as we are still rocking a 60Hz refresh, even on the new 16s. I'd even take 90Hz. If you consider the original iPhone from 2007.
Just slide it across and I scroll.
Also had a 60Hz refresh rate. And that you can get a Galaxy A35 with a 120Hz AMOLED screen for about a third the price-ish. And essentially Apple's reasoning for not including a high refresh rate screen is that you can pay more to get it with a Pro model. It's not a deal breaker, it's just frustrating. And I think if you are jumping ship from Android perhaps to the new 16s and you're used to a 120Hz phone, then this will feel sluggish, even with the fancy new chip that's actually significantly faster this year. So that is my number one gripe of these iPhones. The rumors are that next year's 17s will get 120Hz, but there's always something else around the corner. It's just an unnecessary compromise. Anyway, let's park that for a moment. The question is, if you're due an upgrade, or you've just got your eyes on a shiny new iPhone and you're thinking, is it worth upgrading to? Should you get a 16 or a 16 Plus, or even pay extra for a Pro or Pro Max? Well, I'm going to answer all those questions for you, and if you do find this video useful, then a thumbs up and a subscribe will be lovely. Did you spot this little shatter in my 16 Pro? I've only had this phone a couple of weeks. All I did was have it on the desk like that, and then I just flipped it over fairly quickly, and yeah, it shattered. Just hit the corner there. Got a fancy new design for the back of my 16 Pro. Always use a case. So by now, you've probably already seen a whole bunch of reviews of the 16s, but now we've had a bit of time, the hype's dying down a little bit after launch, and I've had the chance to use these for a few weeks, and I've had a good chance to test them and see what I like and what I don't like, and you know what? I'm convinced that this one, the cheapest entry-level $799 in pounds and dollars iPhone 16, is the one to go for. Or if you do want a bigger screen and actually a much longer battery life, for 100 more, the 16 Plus. This year, I'm more impressed by the regular 16s than I am by the Pros. I think this is a more significant upgrade. To give you the headlines, same brightness as the Pros, and also now the same dimness, I'm not sure that's a word, but it can go down to 1 nit now, although still no always on display, and also no ProMotion, but dimmer screen. Also new chip, A18, which is actually a 2-generational leap from the A16 that we had before. We have 2 extra gigs of RAM, and together with that A18 chip, does support Apple Intelligence. All iPhone 16s and also the previous 15 Pros do. We have a new 48 megapixel camera, which also gives you a basically 2 times lossless zoom. The 16s also now get the action button as well as the camera control, so I can open the camera there and use it as a shutter, as well as the new revamped photography styles, audio mix, a lot of the new camera features, although not some of the higher end Pro features as they'd call it, like 4K 120. The 16s also get better cooling with a new internal design, stronger ceramic glass, faster wireless charging, Wi-Fi 7, and a new modem, the same as the Pros, which gives you faster mobile data speeds. And of course, new colors: white, black, teal, and I reckon the best two, pink and ultramarine. There is one big problem though, and it's not the 60Hz screen, or the fact that it's still USB 2 rather than USB 3, or the fact that we don't have a telephoto lens, or that we don't have an always-on display, or that Apple Intelligence is taking forever to roll out. The big problem with the new 16s is because they've put the cameras in this vertical alignment so you can shoot spatial photos and videos for your Vision Pro headset. I'm not sure the Venn diagram of people buying the cheaper iPhones and also a $3,500 Apple Vision Pro, but anyway, because of this vertical alignment, going back to what they actually did with the 12, if I just pop it on the desk here and then bring in last year's 15, it wobbles on any flat surface. The 15s don't, the old 12 does a little bit. More importantly, I think there are a lot of nice upgrades with the 16s, and for me, I think the difference between the regular phones, quote unquote, and the Pros is closer than ever. I don't know if it's worth paying an extra £200 to get a Pro or a Pro Max. I mean, we're getting basically the same looking matte glass on the back with a brushed metal frame, even if one is aluminium and the other one's a fancy titanium. And actually, in favor of these cheaper iPhones, not only do we get far more interesting colors, but they're also a good deal lighter. The 6.7-inch 16 Plus actually weighs the same as the 6.3-inch Pro. Yes, the Pros have slightly thinner bezels, and they've been able to squeeze in a 0.2-inch bump in screen size and a similar footprint to before, although they are slightly taller, but I actually think the 16 Plus is the Goldilocks size. It's still a bit smaller and significantly lighter than the Pro Max, but with a similar screen size, and the battery life isn't far behind. In fact, all 16s last considerably longer than before, and we'll come back to that in a second. So what exactly are the advantages of going Pro this year and spending a couple hundred extra? Well, the main one I would say is the camera. Obviously the additional telephoto lens, the 5x zoom. We also get a bigger sensor, high resolution ultra wide. We get the LiDAR, which is great for nighttime portrait shots and also for measuring things in the Measure app. That's basically the only thing I use it for. And also more pro camera features, like be able to shoot in ProRes, ProRAW, 4K 120, although they all get cinematic video and action mode video, and also the exact same selfie camera. As I say, the Pros do also get slightly bigger screens with those slimmed down bezels. You get the smoother 120Hz ProMotion screen, of course, although with the same brightness and the same sharpness. We get the slightly more powerful A18 Pro chip rather than the A18. They also have improved studio mics. The Pros also get an always-on display, faster USB 3 ports, although same charging speeds, slightly longer battery life. The Pros can also be spec'd with up to 1 TB of storage, double the maximum 512 on the regular ones, although they all come with base 128 gigs except for the Pro Max, which is 256, which feels pretty stingy for the 16 Pro. £1,000, 200 more than this guy, yet it gets the same 128 base storage. That doesn't seem quite right to me. But what about performance? How much faster are these new 16s? Well, as I say, just scrolling around the home screen, you're not really going to see much difference even coming from an iPhone 12. Things will load up quicker, particularly more demanding apps like games, but because we're still stuck with that 60 Hz, it doesn't feel significantly different. Having said that, this actually is quite a bit faster in terms of performance and also cooling and thermals. Apple's actually redesigned the internal structure, the whole layout of the phone internally here and where the chip is, and they're saying that we're going to get up to 30% better cooling, better thermals on the 16s. And actually with the Pros, because these get a new graphite aluminium substructure, as they call it, around a 25% improvement. But just how much faster is this new A18 chip, along with the extra 2 gigs of RAM? Well, firing up Geekbench 6, if we combine the single and multi-core scores, the 16s are about 65% faster than the 12, and about 26% faster than last year's 15. More impressive, though, are the gains in terms of graphics. The base iPhone 16s are almost twice as fast as the iPhone 12 from 5 years ago, and just over a third faster versus last year. And what's interesting is that the A18 in these new 16s is capable of ray tracing, and also in some games like War Thunder offers the higher graphical settings that just aren't available on the 15s. So this is a 2-generation jump. We've gone from the A16 to the A18. However, don't forget that the Pros have the Pro chip as well. We've got the A18 Pro versus the regular 18, and combining single and multi, we're looking at about a 10% uptick here in Geekbench, which measures the processor, and 14% uptick in graphics performance. So the Pros are decently faster, but don't forget they also have to handle the ProMotion screen, the BFU encoder, 4K 120, and all those extra things. So in reality, the only difference you'll probably notice is the refresh rate. And you can pretty much run any app or any game flawlessly, even the latest AAA titles like Assassin's Creed Mirage or Resident Evil. So the 16s are a good deal faster, but I think more importantly, they also last a good deal longer. The battery life across the board with these guys is a lot better. Now, a couple of weeks back, I posted my YouTube battery drain test with a lot of the Android flagships, although at the time I hadn't received my 16 Plus, which was a bit frustrating, so I couldn't include that. But still, the results showed of the 3 new iPhones that I did have, they lasted considerably longer than last year's iPhone 15s. So I figured I'd run another test with the new 16s and also comparing it to the older iPhones. And this is a more simple, just YouTube battery drain test, but they've all been updated to iOS 18, they all have 100% battery health, that is very important, and they've all been set to about 300 nits. Now Apple's numbers will be much higher because their tests are just local video playback, not streaming, and also they won't be as bright. And interestingly, each iPhone generation steadily increased the size of the battery, and it's actually quite satisfying to see the phones run out of battery from left to right, starting with the 12, then the 13, then the 14, then the 15, leaving the two 16s, and actually when the new iPhone 16 kicks the bucket at 16 hours 49, which itself is very impressive and about 2 hours longer than the 15, the 16 Plus still has 20% of its battery left. And in fact, it goes on for another 4 hours. It takes almost 21 hours to kill the 16 Plus in this test. My main takeaway though is that for an extra £100 to get the bigger screen and also a significantly longer battery life, and given the fact that it's also quite a bit lighter and a touch smaller than the Pro Max, I'm actually leaning towards thinking the 16 Plus is the one to get. Also, all iPhone 16s now come with faster wireless charging, although you do need to buy the new 30-watt adapter, as well as the new wireless pad, and you can tell it's new because it has a braided cable, but Apple says you'll get 50% in about half an hour, and that is pretty much bang on what I got in my test. Now, if you have already seen a few iPhone reviews, then you'll be sick to death of people talking about the camera control, but it is one of the new features, and I'm not going to spend much time on it because it's not very interesting as far as I'm concerned. It's nice to have the option because it basically frees up the action button, which apparently most people use as a shortcut to open the camera. But what I would do in the camera control settings is change it to a double click, a double press, so you're not accidentally opening the camera as much. You are very welcome to disagree, but I've been using these iPhones for a few weeks now, and outside of the actual review testing videos I've been making, I've never used it once, or maybe to show someone, oh, this is the new feature. I think I'm accidentally pressing it more than I'm actually using it. For me, it's useful as a shortcut to open the camera and maybe then take a single picture, but I never really bother messing around with the menu. I think for me, the action button is the most significant upgrade, because don't forget, we didn't get that either on last year's 15s, so we have two new buttons on the 16s, and I know for some people, they absolutely swear by using it for accessibility settings, or as a translator, or to have a specific action to open an app, perhaps. So camera control, kind of gimmicky in my mind, take it or leave it, but it is nice to have the action button. Okay, let's talk about this camera. So two lenses, main 48 megapixel and the 12 megapixel ultra wide. So unlike the Pros, we don't get the telephoto, the 5x telephoto. Also, the sensors in the main camera are a bit smaller, so the Pro will have higher quality photos and videos, and we'll do some comparisons in a second. But we do also lose some of the Pro features. I can't shoot in log, I can't shoot in ProRes or Pro RAW. There's no 4K 120 support, although I can still shoot, as I'm doing here, 4K 60, and we also have cinematic mode. So in many ways, the Pro phones are actually more designed for sort of slightly more serious photographers and videographers. But let's dive into this camera, and to give you a sense of, well, how much better it is than before, and also how it compares with the Pros, let me just show you a few examples side by side. So we've got 6 different phones here, and I've got shots here, both in good light and in low light, going between the ultra wide, the main camera, and then also zooming in to 2x. And there's so much to take away from this, but it is interesting to see that the 16s, both the regular and the Pro, seem to share this very similar, more muted tone compared to some of the previous iPhones, which are brighter and more vibrant. And to my eyes, I would say that we've seen more significant camera improvements going between, say, the 12 and 13 and then 13 and 14 than perhaps the 15 to the 16. Well, that is until we zoom into 2x. Because the new iPhone 16s share a similar 48 megapixel Fusion main camera as the Pros, not only can you now capture it at that full 48 megapixels, but we're also now getting a pixel binned 24 megapixel output, and also the ability to zoom into essentially a 2x lossless photo because it's taking a crop of that high resolution sensor. Now, in terms of how the 16 stacks up to the 16 Pros, well, obviously we have that extra lens. So if we zoom into 10 times, which is the maximum you can on the iPhone 16s, having that 5x telephoto on the Pros means for longer range zoom, it's a night and day difference. The Pro's main camera also has a bigger sensor, 1/1.28 inches versus 1/1.56 inches, if you're asking. The ultra-wide on the Pro is also 48 megapixels rather than 12, so the Pros are a decent step up in terms of the camera, with the main, the ultra-wide, the telephoto lens, although the front selfie camera is exactly the same. One of the best upgrades is the addition of photography styles. Well, I say addition, this actually did come out a couple of years ago, but they've been revamped, and you have a bunch of different either undertones or different modes to choose from, and these are kind of like advanced filters, which you can either preview and shoot with straight away, or apply afterwards, or even remove afterwards. Whether or not you'll actually end up using it that much, I'm not sure, but it does allow you to get away from that more traditional iPhone look. You can bring in more shadows and give it more of a filmic look. And this upgraded, more baked-in implementation of photography styles is exclusive to the iPhone 16 range. Future Tom jumping in here because I'm actually editing this video that you're watching right now. And as I was going through the camera comparison bit, I was looking at my 16 Pro and Pro Max samples, and I was thinking, why are they so much warmer and more yellow than the other two, if I sort of show you there? And I realized it's because during my filming, I went to play with the photography styles later in the day, and then that set it as the standard. And so all my future shots were shot in rose gold. So I was thinking, crap, I'm going to have to go out and film it all again. But no, because you can switch it back to a standard mode afterwards, it's non-destructive, very much like going between a portrait and a non-portrait with an iPhone. I can just set it back to standard, essentially turning off the photo styles so I can recover all this. Very helpful. But arguably, we still get the two main camera upgrades that the Pro does. We have the revamped photography styles, which means you can get away from that traditional iPhone look and sort of tweak it. Although I can't say I've actually found myself using it that much in practice, and also the camera control button. Now, we may not have the studio mics of the Pros, but we do get audio mix. So with the bells ringing in the background, let's see if I jump between the standard mode and then in frame, then the studio mode, and finally cinematic, and back to standard. How much does it cut out the bells? And we also get two of my favorite iPhone camera features, the ability to turn any photo into a portrait and also unportraify it. Is that a word? Because it captures the depth data when you take a regular photo, so you don't have to think, I'm going to take a portrait here or a photo here. But again, that's not new for the 16. That was introduced on last year's 15. And also we have the ability now to pause video recording, which I'm a huge fan of. I can't believe it took that long to come on an iPhone. But again, that's an iOS 18 feature, so you should be able to get it all the way back on the iPhone XS. Okay, so let's wrap this up. I would say that this year, the iPhone 16s, the base models, are the most significant upgrade year on year compared to the Pros. To have USB-C, to have all the same buttons, to have the dynamic island, to have these fantastic colors, to have the A18 chip, which isn't far behind the A18 Pro, to have support for Apple Intelligence, to have photography styles and audio mix. Most of the fun new stuff you're getting on the regular 16s as well. All we need now is this pesky ProMotion to come over, and I'm sure we will see that next year, but then there'll be something else that it doesn't have. There's always something else in tech that you can wait for. I would say if you're due an upgrade or even just eyeing one of these up, yes, it's worth it. And for my money, given that this is only 100 quid more than this, and you get the bigger screen and also a much longer battery life, I think the 16 Plus could be the best choice. This is the best thing about where I live. The swans have been trained to ring this bell, and then they get fed. How do you teach a swan to ring a bell? That's fantastic. But what do you reckon? Are the 16s worth the upgrade? Have you already bought one? Let me know what you make of these in the comments below. And if you've got any other questions at all, thank you so much for watching, guys. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.